will see in this presentation how to create a post-tension pre-stress bridge. First, by modeling it with OBM, transferring data from OBM to OpenBridge for the analysis, then the tendon definition, what happens in case of modification, and finally drawing generation. In this first part, we will see how quick it is to model that kind of bridge by defining an alignment, setting the type of bridge, defining the template, the variations, placing the supports, placing the barriers and the handrails. First, we will start from an existing alignment placed on a given terrain. We will define the bridge on the top view with reference to the profile view. We define the type of bridge. Here it will be a cast in place concrete box. Then we will define the different support lines that will give us the different span of the bridge. Here we will indicate that we have 3 spans, so 4 supports. These supports are perpendicular to the alignment, and we give a length between the different supports, defining the starting of the bridge. Then here we will define each length of each span, so we will make the span in the middle a little longer from both the edge spans. Here we have a clear definition of the geometry of the bridge. Then we will place the deck, and for that we will define a cross-section. This cross-section is made with a template. This template defines both the interior and exterior of the bridge and also the place where we put the tendons. We will define that we place this template from the beginning to the end of the bridge, giving us a tube in space that follow the horizontal alignment and vertical alignment. This template can be edited and can have variations. Here we see that we have defined a variable which is the height of the cross-section, and when we modify it, the webs are following, and also the data of the pre-stress tendons in the bottom slabs are following. We give a variation. This variation can be copied directly from an Excel sheet and imported or pasted inside the menu of variation for this total depth. We can see the variation as parabolic and apply to the bridge. The total volume of the bridge is recomputed, and we can see this variation now in space. We can then place support. For that, we will define a standard pier. This pier is just a simple column, and we place these piers at both locations of the piers after the first and the second span. We define the elevation reference for this pier, giving the difference between the top of the footing and the natural ground. Here we will put it 1 meter lower the ground. In the same way, we can place a standard abutment where we give also the different parameters. So first we will choose our standard abutment here and say that it will be automatically adapted to the width of the bridge, and we indicate if it's the start or the end of the bridge to define the orientation of our abutment. In the same way, we define the elevation of the footing with reference to the ground. We can then place the same abutment at the beginning of the bridge. Then we can place automatically the different bearings. So we choose the bearings among a library of different bearings represented by a cell. We define the distance between both bearings laterally, and first we will define on each pier that we have a set of 2 bearings centered on the pier. Automatically, we can see that the height of the pier, the column pier, is adjusted to give enough room for the bearing between the deck. We can define the parameters also for the abutment. In that case, we must have a wider distance between the bearing transversally, but also we must advance the bearing with reference to the line of the support, which is, in this case, is the back wall of the abutment. And we can place at the same time the bearing for the first and the last abutment. In the same way, the abutment is modified to give enough room to the bearing by adjusting the elevation of the soffit. If we review this, we can see here that the soffit has been lowered and the back wall has exactly the size of the deck. We can then continue by placing different elements that we call barrier. These are typically some template, exactly the same as we defined the deck, where we can add different layers on top of our deck. We see here that we have already 2 different edges that have been placed on left and right of the deck. We can add here some precast footpaths that will be placed on top of the deck with reference to a point of the template of the deck. So here the reference point will be the edge, and we just define some offset from this point. And we can, like that, add the different element of the surface of the surfacing of the bridge. We can also add more details, for example handrails, by adding different cells that will represent this element. So for instance, here we choose an handrail, which has been modeled in 3D, and we place this handrail along the edge by defining the distance between 2 cells, or distance between 2 handrails, which is mainly the length of this element of handrail. This handrail will be along the edge, and the distance will be taken on this edge and not on the central alignment. Also, we have a rotation of this handrail, so it will be parallel to the alignment and not perpendicular to the edge. We define the beginning point of this handrail and the ending point of this handrail, and automatically we will see that the cells are placed along the edge of the bridge and will represent our handrail on one side. We can place the same thing on the other side of the bridge. And here we have finished the total modeling of our bridge with some detail. In this second part, we will see how to transfer data from OpenBridge Modeler to OpenBridge by defining the different parameters and running some test load case. Then we will review the results of what has been set. It's as simple as pressing one button and sending data to OpenBridge. Our main menu allows us to define which code we will use for the analysis, also what is the accuracy, so in how many parts we will place in each segment, and also the fixity of all support, mainly if it's fixed or free, in what direction on the 4 different supports, the 2 abutments and the piers. 2 load cases are automatically defined, a static one self-weight and a dynamic one computing the 10 first eigenvalues. Here we can see the full model in nodes and beam elements. We can display the full body and check that it's exactly the bridge that we had in OBM. We can also display some results along this model. For example, in this case, we will display the bending moment on the main deck due to self-weight. Let's display it only in elements and nodes, so we better see the results. Next part, we will see the tendon definition inside OpenBridge. So we define the geometry through the different template points. Then we will define the stress scheduling of the tendon and automatically calculate the geometry in the tendon and send them back to OBM. So we have defined different points along each span where we define where the tendon is. Here we have the points on the cross section. So we have a middle point in the web for the abutment, a bottom point for the third of the span, and a top point above the pier supports. On each of these specific points, we define where the tendon is and at the same time the tangent that we should have. And here we will display a tangent. We will impose a tangent of horizontal to be sure that the tendon do not get out of the concrete. We can review these different points on the cross section and note the variation of the cross section at the same time. We can also copy this tendon from left to right. In that case, we just have to change the name of the different points along the bridge, and all the different points left will be switched to right. So we have one tendon in each web. This tendon may represent several tendons, as it is just the preliminary study of this bridge. After defining these different points, we will ask to RM to automatically recompute, and this is made using cubic curves between the different points with imposed tangent at the top and the bottom. We can also check the minimum radius along the tendon to be sure that there is no radius under the limit. We can check every part of the bridge here, so we display the different cross section. And then after recomputing, we can see in a transparent model the curves representing the tendon, each tendon being inside the web. We can then export from Modeler to analysis this tendon. So now we can see them inside the node and beamed element model. We can then send them back to our OBM model through an XML file. This can be sent as well as a reinforcement, for example. In the next part, we will see how we can import back the tendon from OBM and review the tendon and see what happens in case of a modification of the geometry, how we need to update the bridge. After leaving OpenBridge, we are back now to our OBM model, and here in the same icon we can update with the different tendons. It will read the XML files and automatically generate tubes representing the duct of each tendon. So if we zoom in, we can see the full representation of each tendon in the web. This tendon is a full element with all different data and attributes attached to it, including the stressing option that we have defined for the tendon. We will now move our bridge from one alignment to another alignment. This is a drastic change. So we will just point the new alignment, and OpenBridge will rebuild totally the new bridge along the new alignment, keeping the same starting station. We can also modify this starting station. And you can see that the whole bridge is following the deck, so not only the deck but also the different supports and also all the handrails and so on. The only thing not following that you can see on the left are the tendons that stay at the same place where they were. But if we zoom, all the rest is there. In the next part, we will now update the OpenBridge model according to this new geometry. We will see an automatic recalculation of tendons, a calculation update, and we will export back the updated tendons to RM. So let's go back to our model and launch RM again. Don't change any option and just updating. As I said, a transfer file already exists, so we just update our model with this new definition. Nothing is changed, nothing is overwritten except the new geometry. And all the calculations are redone according to this new geometry. The eigenvalues are computing for the new model, and it will display these different eigenmodes. Exactly the same. Now we can see, and you can notice that so the geometry has changed, the curvature in the other direction, but the tendons have been set back to the position, proper position inside our bridge, correctly inside the webs. In the same way, if we want to display the results, we can display the same results, for example, so the bending moment along the deck due to self-weight, and we get a corresponding result as we get before without redefining anything. And we will send back these new tendons, so the updated geometry of the tendons, we send them back to OBM. Using the same XML file. And now we read in OBM, and you see that the tendons have been updated, and we can see that these tendons are back to their definition. So if we look through the bridge, so we see the tendons that have been updated and placed in the web according to the new geometry. We will finish by some documents generation, and we will see a support automatic drawing, some cross-section that are automatically dimensioned, and finally profile generation. We have the possibility to define the different views that we want to see in our drawing for the support definition. So here we check some views. We define also some parameters indicating, for example, if we want to cut through some piles, not to take too much place on the drawings. And finally, we accept these parameters, and we will ask for an automatic drawing. So the only thing that we have to do is to point out which support we want to do, indicating the scale that we want to use for this drawing, that we want to generate different views, and automatically, so you see that our drawing is set with the 3 different views that we ask for, with all the different dimensions in the top and front and side views. We can also, with simple microsession, add different dimensions that will be attached to the different elements of the pier, and so will be updated in case we have to define something differently. We can also produce cross sections. So the same, after defining the scale, we indicate where is the cross section, and automatically the cross section is computed. And as you can see, all the different elements that we have placed on the bridge are automatically dimensioned. At the place where we have created the cross section, so the handrails are almost not noticeable. In this view, we see how we create profiles. So the profile view, the profile view will help us to create the profile drawing. So in this profile view, we have to ask for automatically compute the intersection with the bridge. And here we see first deform with the profile by 10, so the profile view, but only intersecting elements. That's why we don't get all the different details. So what we will ask is to change, and we have the possibility to display, for example, back elements. We ask to recompute it, and automatically, so now we can see all the details appearing, and with seen and not seen elements. That's why we can see, for example, so the tendons that will be dotted because they are hidden, but you can see also the handrails on the top and all the different elements that we have inside the bridge. Based on this, we can ask automatically to set up different drawings. For that, we will define some boundaries on the profile that will generate the different drawings. So just defining which scale we want to use and what is the limit, and automatically the sheets are placed one after each other. And so we can define that we want 3 sheets covering the profile, defining what is the base of our drawing, what is the scale of that profile, and the scale of the dimension that we will put afterwards. And in the same way, the profiles is automatically generated with a grid, so we can review these different drawings and add dimensions if needed.